Conference. Our next speaker has seen a series of good results from the north of England, but that will come roughly to an end after today's Blackburn Rovers draw against Burnley. I'd like you all to give me a round of applause for our party president, Tim Farron.
Very happy with the point. It's away from home. Good afternoon, all of you, and thank you very much for remaining this late in the afternoon. I have a new title. According to the Daily Telegraph, I am, and I quote, Nick Clegg's ambassador to Planet Beard, which is apparently you. So I guess you could call this the ambassador's reception. With these third-rate gags, I am really spoiling you. No Ferrero Rocher, maybe some pork scratchings. Actually, amazingly, there are some genuine diplomats here today, and captains of industry, journalists, chief executives of charities, ministers, as well as we inhabitants of Planet Beard, because party conferences are a big deal, but they're also a big con. Party conferences are bigger and glitzier than ever before, but they are a facade, because the number of people who actually belong to those parties has gone down the plug hole. In the 1980s, the Tory party had more than 1 million members. Labour had 500,000, we had 100,000. Since then, the Tories have lost 3/4 of their membership. We've lost over half of ours. Labour have lost 2/3 of theirs. To put it in perspective, 3 times as many people entered the X Factor this year than paid a party membership fee, which is shocking, but it's at least given me an idea for improving candidate selection. So those of us who still belong to a political party have become an endangered species. Most people still vote, but while your vote may be dictated by your judgment or by habit, your motivation to join a political party comes from your gut. And if no one gets you in your gut, captures your imagination, or makes the hairs on the back of your neck stand on end, why would you choose to join up? But I have faith in the British people that they will join a real movement, a movement that brings back that elusive political phenomenon, the big idea. 70 years ago, Liberals changed Britain with the biggest idea and the best idea, Beveridge's idea. William Beveridge named the problems that Britain faced, the 5 giant evils: squalor, idleness, want, ignorance, disease, and then he named the solutions: decent homes, full employment, welfare, state schools, and the National Health Service. A consensus that put human dignity first. A consensus that government must never wash its hands when it can roll up its sleeves. A consensus that made Britain both great and decent. A consensus that was broken by Thatcherism and buried by New Labour. And then profit mattered more than people. Can-do ambition replaced by don't-care laissez-faire. An economy built on short-term greed. It was bound to end in tears, and it did. And now it's hard to believe that it's only 5 years since the global financial crash. At Labour's conference, they'll blame it all on the international market. At the Tory conference, they'll blame it all on the last Labour government. And they'll both be right. But what does it matter if we don't learn the lessons and build a new consensus? What does it matter if politics and economics carries on like nothing ever happened? Liberal Democrats called it right in May 2010, and we see the evidence slowly emerging of a stronger economy with higher growth and lower unemployment. But only the complacent would think that we are out of the woods. And there's some who seem content to steer us straight back in to those woods. We still face the danger of a re-inflating housing market, unsustainable growth fed by cheap credit, and real growth thwarted for the want of skills. The economic recovery can only be guaranteed if it is built on firm foundations. Now, I am not easily impressed, but this phrase behind us is spot on, because one leads from the other. We will never have a strong economy if it is not underpinned by a fair society. The Tories refuse to understand that because they exist to promote the interests of the richest inhabitants of the square mile of the City of London. Well, we exist to promote the interests of the people living along every mile. Every 50-year-old out of work fearing for their future. Every school leaver determined to build a career. Every family desperate for a home. The tens of millions of people we know living on what Lyndon Johnson referred to as the outskirts of hope. Those people are the reason that we must now build a new consensus. So we build a consensus that says, if there is a housing crisis, then we stop waiting for the weather to change. We make the weather. We build the houses. Local government reborn and a housing crisis solved by Liberal Democrats allowing councils to build again. A new consensus which says that every child gets the same opportunity in life regardless of their parents' wealth or where they were born, that says that we liberate teachers to teach to inspire rather than teaching to the test. A new consensus where we value and support our teachers, our nurses and all of our public servants, not demonise or diminish them. A new consensus. A new consensus which says no one in work should be in want, and so if you are on the minimum wage, you should pay no income tax. It is time that we made the minimum wage a living wage. And a new consensus that no one should be thrown on the scrap heap in midlife. That we as a nation insist that there will be hope and a future for those out of work in their 40s, 50s and 60s. A new consensus which says that banks are not above the law, that they exist to serve our economy, not to be our economy. And a new consensus that immigration is not an evil, but a blessing. That immigration adds £7 billion a year to Britain's economy. On my watch, we will not join the intolerant anti-immigration rhetoric of our opponents. Let the others preach the politics of division while they follow their focus groups. We will do what is right. But I'll tell you what, above everything else, a new consensus that all of these challenges are nothing compared to the existential threat of climate change. Our economy, security, all our hopes and dreams rest on whether we will choose together to fight climate change and whether we will win that fight. Today, around 2,000 babies will be born up and down Britain. And by the time they reach old age, they could see the global temperature rise by 7 degrees. In their lifetimes, we will see whole nations displaced, farmland deluged, industry devastated. Don't tell me that climate change is a side issue for Guardian readers and inhabitants of planet Beard. It is the biggest issue for everybody. It is squalor, ignorance, idleness, want and disease rolled into one. It is the giant evil to end giant evils, and we will only defeat it if we can put it front and centre of a new consensus. So on housing, jobs, fairness, climate change, there are always reasons to put off doing what is right. But don't forget, the Beveridge report was implemented in the face of the harshest financial circumstances this country had ever seen. So don't let anyone tell you that we can't change Britain for better today. We already have the first fruits of this consensus, thanks to Nick Clegg and Liberal Democrats in government. A pupil premium to enable every child to have a fair start in life. A new and bigger pension to give dignity and security in retirement. The end of the shameful practice of detaining the children of asylum seekers. You did that. You achieved that. And more. From Eastleigh to Orkney, your campaigning is making Britain better because we can only make our vision a reality if we win. So, the 2014 elections. They are a great opportunity and an even bigger threat. We defend more than 700 councillors and 12 MEPs. This is the last big test before the general election, but it is much more important than that. At stake are hundreds of campaigners who deserve to win, but cannot take that victory for granted. At stake is the life's work of so many friends as we defend our final foothold in several councils. And at stake is our very presence in the European Parliament. Let's just call next May's elections challenging. So imagine my delight when Nick Clegg asked me to chair next year's election campaign. I vividly remember taking the call in April. I was in Bodmin canvassing with Dan Rogerson's mum and dad, which was lucky because I needed a bit of wisdom. Don't touch it with a barge pole, they said. But I said yes because nothing has ever motivated me more than the pundits telling us that we can't win. I understand the threat, but the only way to deal with that threat is to face it, respect it, and use your wits, your experience, and your energy to overcome it. So we've got to make certain that we learn from our successful fightbacks in Cornwall, Hull, Newcastle, and we must all understand that unless we top the poll in our own constituencies in Westminster, we will not retain our MEPs. And these European elections are the most important ever. It's not just our party's place in Europe that's at stake, it's Britain's place in Europe too. Too often, we have fought European elections without daring to mention Europe on a single leaflet. This time, that changes. We must proudly say that if you care about strengthening our economy, if you care about jobs, if you care about catching criminals, if you care about our environment, if you care about continuing almost 70 years of peace and security in Europe, if you care about Britain, then you say yes to Europe. The positions of the parties are clear. Liberal Democrats backing Britain in Europe. UKIP hankering after empire. The Tories hankering after UKIP. Labour hiding behind the sofa. And David Cameron. Call me soft, but am I the only Liberal Democrat who just wants him to be a bit better? I mean, if he wants to be a statesman, a bit of consistency would be absolutely brilliant. But he gets the train to Edinburgh to say better together and the train to Brussels to say better apart. Well, we say better together in both. Now, for me, it's a bit sad this, for me, this conference is a milestone. It is my 50th party conference, if you count the emergency ones, and I do. But, I mean, 50 conferences. What is the opportunity cost of that? How many foreign holidays could I have had instead? But conference has been my fixture since my teens. It's where I catch up with my friends. It's where I recharge my political batteries and get my inspiration. And I have made some unreasonable sacrifices over the years in order to attend. I missed my chance of a record contract. 1989, it's a long story, but it's true. I've even missed, as we've heard, Rovers against Burnley. I once missed signing on down the Dole office. Steve Webb calmed down, it wasn't recently. But everything moves for conference. Nothing moves conference. Except for next year, on my watch. Conference will move because next September, we face a vote even more important than the May elections, the Scottish referendum. Now, I'm not sure if you've noticed, but I'm from the north of England. I live closer to Holyrood than I do to Westminster. And that is bound to impact on my identity, on my culture. The slogan of the campaign here sums up so well what I feel. We are better together. But that means, of course, that we would surely be poorer apart. And not just economically poorer. It goes far deeper than that. I don't want to get soppy, but just know that the rest of Britain will be heartbroken if you left. But my desire for Scotland to remain My desire for Scotland to remain at the heart of the UK is based on more than affection. It's about values, values of community, of collective endeavour, of basic decency. If you want to know my main, even selfish reason for being so passionate that we win next year's referendum, it's because I share those values too. Those values are not just Scottish. They're my values. They're values shared by people in Cumbria and indeed in communities throughout the United Kingdom. Those of us who believe in more compassionate, caring and consensual values should stick together, not break apart. Speaking of values, you may have noticed that we've started writing the manifesto for the 2015 general election. Now, we could make two errors in the manifesto process. The first would be to just reissue the 2010 election manifesto in complete denial that any of the last 3 and a bit years ever happened. That would mean throwing away our achievements while keeping the pain. We're not going to do that. The other mistake we could make would be to let our manifesto become a pre-conceded set of compromises in preparation for potential coalition partners. So we could Tipex out of the manifesto things we think the other parties won't like decarbonisation targets, higher taxes for the wealthy, a sane policy on nuclear weapons. Well, not while I'm president. If we end up in coalition negotiations, that's when we compromise. We do not compromise when we write our manifesto. We negotiate on our terms from our strongest position and not from a halfway house. And because Liberals going back to our constituencies and preparing for government is no longer such an unlikely idea, prepared is what we should be. Preparing for a coalition government is essential. Aiming for a coalition government is pointless. You know that we could get 25% of the vote and be out of power, or 12% of the vote and be in power. Now, as president, I will have nothing to do with us trying to achieve something that we can barely affect. I only know of one way to make a difference and to change lives, and that's to win elections, bucking the trend seat by seat. And we're only going to succeed if we remember that community politics is both the way that we win and what we are for. I will not let our experience of government intoxicate us and tame us. I will not let us forget that we are the party immersed in our communities, not imprisoned by Westminster. Let others stand just to hold office. Let us stand to make a difference. So I wonder how many folks rescued from poverty in London, Manchester, here in Glasgow, know that they have beverage to thank. The answer is that it doesn't matter. Life is short, and we will all be forgotten. But each generation still leaves a legacy, and you can be sure that does matter. We remember the legacy of beverage not because we are sentimental, but because we are determined that the legacy of this generation will also be one of actively meeting the needs of our fellow human beings. They need homes, so we will build homes. They are in want of work, so we will make it our business to help them to find it. They need care, so we will make sure they get the best. There is no stronger economy if there is no fairer society. Otherwise, we waste the talents of millions of people who could make our economy stronger. I was brought up in a terrace house in Lancashire in the 1980s, raised by a single mum who was unemployed from time to time. Half my friends' parents always seemed to be out of work. Unemployment, no prospects, bad housing, need, a constant struggle to get by. They were not the findings of a report that I read. They were the everyday things I saw around me. And the thing that struck me most of all when I saw the absence of work and the absence of hope was what a waste. What a waste of wonderful people. They paid the price for the breaking of the beverage consensus. That is why I want us in this party and now in this generation to end that waste and to build and lead a new consensus. What an audacious, presumptuous thing for beverage a man who was only an MP for a single year, a member of the third party, to raise his eyes beyond what was thought possible towards what he knew was vital. Britain owes him so much, and we owe it to ourselves and to our country to revive his legacy, to extend his legacy, to have the audacity to go over the heads of the other two parties to the people in our country and stake out a new consensus that says that Britain can be prosperous, innovative and successful, and Britain can be generous, decent and fair. Not more of the same, not more of the same, but a movement for change, a new consensus. That is our vision, my ambition, the Liberal Democrat mission. If you want to know who we are, this is who we are. If you want to know what we are for, this is what we are for. If you want a reason to give us your vote, this is that reason. Come and join us. Thank you.